I am Isabella. I am 29 years old, and for a very long time, I believed that my only value in this world was tied to how quiet and obedient I could be. From the outside looking in, our family appeared absolutely flawless. My father, Gerald, owned the largest logistics and construction company in our entire county. We lived in a sprawling 2-story colonial home that sat on beautifully manicured acres of land, with a massive driveway that proudly showcased his luxury Mercedes, my mother pristine Lexus, and the brand new BMW my older brother Marcus received just for existing. Marcus was 4 years older than me, and he was the undisputed golden child. He was the heir apparent, meticulously groomed from the moment he could walk to eventually take over my father's massive business empire. Everything Marcus wanted was handed to him on a silver platter, while my ambitions were completely ignored. Growing up in that house, I learned very early on that daughters held a deeply inferior place in my father's eyes. At our lavish family dinners, the conversation always orbited entirely around Marcus, his upcoming projects, and his bright corporate future. I merely sat at the far end of the long dining table, passing the porcelain dishes in total silence. I will never forget overhearing my father speaking to my mother in the hallway when I was a teenager. His voice was low, calculating, and cold. He explicitly stated that daughters do not need to achieve any sort of professional success. He told her that my only real job was to eventually marry well, to serve as a pretty, compliant asset to secure lucrative business alliances for his logistics company. In that devastating moment, I realized I was not a human being with dreams of my own. I was simply a corporate bargaining chip, the only person in the world who truly saw me. The only person who recognized my brilliant potential was my late Grandpa Harrison. He was a sharp, fiercely intelligent, self-made man who had built a highly successful chain of hardware stores from absolute scratch. He would sit quietly at our tense family gatherings, closely observing my father's toxic, controlling behavior. He saw the exact way my father dismissed my opinions and praised Marcus for doing the bare minimum. One summer afternoon, Grandpa Harrison pulled me aside on his porch. His eyes were incredibly serious as he looked at me and made a secret, binding promise. He told me he saw the dark reality of my father control, and he knew my parents would eventually fail to protect me. He promised me that he had already prepared a highly secure financial future for me, a secret escape route for when the inevitable day came. I was too young to fully understand the massive weight of his words back then, but that quiet promise would eventually become the key to saving my entire life. The specific catalyst for my absolute nightmare began just the summer before I left for college. My parents called me into the kitchen and handed me a standard corporate credit card. My mother specifically told me it was strictly for educational necessities like books and essential supplies for my upcoming semester. I was 18 years old and so incredibly eager to prove to them that I could be highly responsible with money. I used that plastic card exactly as it was intended. I did not buy clothes or makeup or anything frivolous. Instead, I purchased exactly $1,200 worth of highly essential data science software and a reliable, refurbished laptop that was absolutely required for my rigorous degree program. A few weeks later, the monthly credit card statement arrived in the mail, and my father, Gerald, erupted into a violent rage right in the middle of our formal dining room. I vividly remember the way the crystal chandelier seemed to shake above us as he violently slammed the paper statement down onto the mahogany table. He completely ignored the obvious educational nature of the purchases. Instead, he looked me dead in the eyes and falsely accused me of going on a reckless and selfish shopping spree. His face was entirely red as he branded me a common thief right in front of my mother and Marcus. He mercilessly demanded that I pay back every single cent of that $1,200 immediately, or face being permanently thrown out of the house into the streets. I was absolutely terrified but deeply determined to clear my name and prove my innocence to my family. I immediately secured 2 grueling part-time jobs, working long weekend shifts at a local coffee shop and late-night shifts at the university library. For many exhausting months, I meticulously kept every single receipt and documented every payment until I paid him back the entire sum. The crushing financial debt was not the only cost, though. Working 25 hours a week meant I simply could not take a full academic course load. I had to painfully stretch my demanding data science degree over several extra years just to manage the heavy workload, while my father explicitly refused to help me with any extra tuition costs. I naively thought that once I handed him the final payment, the entire terrible ordeal was finally over. I thought he would simply forget about it and move on with his life. However, I severely underestimated the darkness in his heart. My father possessed an incredibly long and deeply vindictive memory. He carefully filed away that cruel accusation in his mind, and he patiently waited for the absolute perfect moment to completely weaponize this fabricated theft against me to destroy my professional future. Despite the immense financial and emotional hurdles my father deliberately placed in my path, I refused to let him win. After years of exhausting late-night shifts and endless studying, I proudly graduated summa cum laude with a 3.9 grade point average in data science. I was armed with glowing recommendation letters from my university professors, and for the very first time in my life, I felt like I had built credentials that no one could ever dismiss. However, my brief moment of victory was immediately crushed right after the graduation ceremony. My father, Gerald, found me standing alone in the parking lot and casually offered me a highly demeaning unpaid apprenticeship at his logistics company. He coldly explained that I would live at home and act as a subservient assistant to my older brother Marcus, so I could finally make myself useful. I took a deep breath and respectfully declined his insulting offer, because I desperately wanted to find my own independent work experience. His face went completely blank as he turned and walked away. I had absolutely no idea that his quiet departure was actually an absolute declaration of war against my entire future. Over the next few months, I eagerly applied to various tech firms and corporate offices downtown, hoping to start my new career. I executed flawless interviews where hiring managers would smile warmly, shake my hand, and promise to call me. Yet every single opportunity mysteriously vanished into thin air. I faced 15 consecutive rejections, and the constant failure made me severely doubt my own intelligence. The horrifying truth was finally revealed when a kind human resources manager took pity on me during my final interview. She stopped looking at my resume and quietly warned me that I needed to ask my father why no one in town would hire a qualified data scientist. That night, I confronted Gerald in his home office, and he confidently admitted to his sinister sabotage. Leveraging his immense business influence, he had systematically contacted every major employer in our county. He intentionally spread the malicious lie that his own daughter was a reckless thief who stole money from her family. Looking me dead in the eyes, he admitted he destroyed my career simply to teach me a lesson and break my independent spirit. He actively wanted to completely ruin my life just to force me to come crawling back home under his complete control. After that devastating confrontation in his home office, I drove back to my tiny studio apartment and stared blankly at my computer screen. My bank account balance was rapidly depleting with exactly $3,000 left to my name. My professional reputation was entirely ruined by my father and his strategic poisonous gossip. I was effectively blacklisted from my hometown professional community because no one wanted to cross the powerful Gerald Thornton. I was a 29-year-old woman with a brilliant data science degree, but I was suddenly entirely unemployable in my own city. My rent was due in just 2 weeks, and I realized I only had maybe 2 months before I would be completely broke. I was incredibly desperate to pay my bills, but I absolutely refused to surrender to my father and his sick, manipulative demands. I would never crawl back to that wealthy estate just to be a subservient pawn in his twisted corporate games. Knowing that every single corporate door was permanently closed to me, I was forced to take the absolute lowest job available. In the middle of the night, I applied to be a minimum wage housekeeper at the local Willow Inn Hotel. It was a modest place on the edge of town, and more importantly, it was the only job listing that required 0 professional references. A few days later, I found myself standing in a small break room accepting a pale blue polyester uniform and a cheap plastic name tag. It was grueling and profoundly humiliating work for a top-tier university graduate. I spent my long, exhausting night shifts scrubbing hotel toilets, emptying trash cans, and changing heavy sheets. I pushed a massive supply cart down the endless hallways while local people who used to respect me actively whispered about my dramatic fall from grace. Yet, amidst the bleach and the dirty towels, I actually found a strange sense of quiet dignity in the grueling labor. It was honest, hard work. Every single paycheck I received was an income that my father could not touch, monitor, or control. I actively chose the intense physical exhaustion of the hotel housekeeping staff over the suffocating, toxic emotional abuse of my family. Scrubbing those porcelain floors gave me absolute clarity. I realized that true freedom often begins at the absolute bottom, and I was willing to survive at any cost. About 6 months into my grueling routine at the Willow Inn, I truly believed I had finally become invisible to the people who hurt me. I thought hiding in the quiet service corridors would keep me safe from my painful past. But I do not believe in coincidences anymore. It was a busy Friday evening, and I was pushing my heavy supply cart down the main hallway near the hotel restaurant. Suddenly, my blood ran entirely cold. I heard a booming, self-satisfied laugh echoing from the dining room that I had learned to fear my entire life. I pressed myself against the wall and carefully peeked around the corner. My father, Gerald, had deliberately orchestrated a lavish family dinner at the exact modest hotel where he knew I was scrubbing toilets. He was sitting at a prominent window table, dressed immaculately in a custom charcoal suit. My mother sat beside him wearing her expensive pearls while Marcus slouched in his chair looking incredibly arrogant. I should have immediately turned around and hidden in the laundry room, but before I could move, my father turned his head and locked eyes with me. He saw the massive cleaning cart, my wrinkled blue polyester uniform, and the bright yellow rubber gloves covering my hands. His face instantly split into a cruel, victorious grin. He nudged my mother and proudly pointed directly at me loudly, declaring to the table that their daughter had finally found her true calling in life. Marcus eagerly joined in on the sheer cruelty. He leaned back and loudly mocked me across the entire dining room, shouting that I had missed a spot. His booming voice ensured that all the other restaurant patrons completely stopped their conversations and turned to stare at me. Then my father stood up, raised his crystal wine glass in a highly calculated mock toast, and loudly proclaimed that maybe now I would finally learn to respect them. It was a meticulously planned public execution designed to completely break my dignity right there on the restaurant floor. He desperately wanted me to break down in pathetic tears and beg for his mercy. However, his sheer malice did not destroy my spirit. Instead, I stood firmly in my cheap uniform, looking right through him. I did not cry. I calmly turned my heavy cart around and walked away with my head held high. That night, his public humiliation only hardened my inner resolve. I vividly remembered Grandpa Harrison and his mysterious promise fueling my fierce determination to survive this nightmare and permanently escape their toxic web. About 2 weeks after that devastating public humiliation in the dining room, the true and horrifying depth of my father Gerald and his sinister intentions was accidentally revealed to me. I was working a very quiet late-night shift at the Willow Inn Hotel, actively restocking heavy cleaning supplies in a small second-floor storage closet. This specific closet was located directly above the hotel restaurant, and the old ventilation ducts carried sound from the dining room below in very strange and clear ways. As I sat on the floor sorting bottles of bleach, I suddenly heard my father's booming, jovial voice echoing through the metal grates. He was having a private business dinner with a wealthy competitor named Richard, who owned a massive plumbing firm in our county. I crept closer and pressed my ear against the cold metal vent. To my absolute horror, I heard Gerald casually discussing a massive corporate merger between their two huge companies. Richard pointed out that their families needed a strategic alliance to dominate the local market, and my father smoothly suggested an arranged marriage between the son of his competitor and me. My blood completely turned to ice as I listened to the man who raised me trade my future like a cheap poker chip. Richard sounded hesitant and mentioned the rumors about me causing trouble and being a thief. My father just laughed, his hollow, confident laugh, and confidently bragged that his entire sabotage campaign was working perfectly. He boasted to Richard that I was currently scrubbing hotel toilets and living in crushing poverty exactly as he planned. He promised the other man that after just a few more months of this intense emotional and financial suffering, I would be completely broken. He guaranteed that I would be so desperate for a comfortable life that I would agree to absolutely anything he commanded, including marrying a total stranger to seal their corporate business deal. Sitting on that dusty closet floor, entirely surrounded by toilet paper and hotel cleaning supplies, I finally realized the terrifying truth. My father did not want to teach me a lesson about respect or family values. He viewed me entirely as a piece of property, to be traded for his own corporate expansion. He was meticulously planning to sell my life to the highest bidder. Knowing that I had to flee the city immediately before his trap closed, I rushed home that night. I opened my laptop and began desperately applying to out-of-state tech firms located hundreds of miles away where his toxic influence and poisonous gossip could never reach me. After that terrifying night in the supply closet, I poured every ounce of my remaining energy into escaping my father. I spent weeks sending out countless applications to tech firms and financial companies located far beyond our county lines, where the toxic influence of Gerald Thornton could never reach me. For a long time, there was nothing but painful silence and generic rejection emails. I was almost ready to give up hope completely when an incredibly unexpected message appeared in my inbox. It was an official invitation from Mercer Holdings, a massive financial and tech conglomerate located 3 states away. The email was highly unusual. It explicitly stated that I was invited for an in-person interview that would be conducted personally by their Chief Executive Officer, Daniel Mercer. I stared at the screen in absolute disbelief because billionaires do not personally interview entry-level data scientists. I almost deleted it, thinking it was some kind of cruel joke, but my desperate need to survive pushed me to reply and accept the invitation. 2 days later, I took a long overnight bus ride to the city. I checked into a cheap motel and carefully ironed the secondhand navy suit I had purchased from Goodwill. I had exactly $47 left in my pocket to my name. I thought I had kept my desperate escape plan a total secret, but I severely underestimated my family. I had made one tiny mistake by posting a vaguely optimistic photo of my coffee at the bus station on my social media profile. My brother Marcus had tracked the location tag, cross-referenced it with corporate headquarters in that city, and immediately alerted our father. On the crisp morning of my interview, as I stood on the sidewalk staring up at the gleaming 26-story corporate tower of Mercer Holdings, my phone began to ring. It was Gerald. His voice was completely flat and laced with pure venom. He aggressively threatened me, boasting that he had already figured out my plan and had personally contacted the executives at Mercer Holdings to completely ruin this opportunity. He demanded that I get on the very next bus and come crawling back home immediately to accept my fate. I stood there, trembling on the concrete, feeling entirely defeated. He was trying to burn down my only escape route from hundreds of miles away. However, I looked down at my scuffed shoes and made a choice. I bravely ignored his terrifying threats, silenced my phone, and pushed through the heavy glass revolving doors. I walked into a breathtaking lobby filled with polished marble floors and executives in custom-tailored suits, fully expecting to be met with another slammed door and a humiliating rejection. I approached the pristine reception desk, feeling incredibly small, but the elegant receptionist simply smiled. Instead of a standard human resources interview, she handed me a premium visitor badge and directed me to a private elevator. I was immediately escorted directly to the top executive floor, completely unaware that this highly unusual meeting was actually the spectacular culmination of my late Grandpa Harrison and his brilliant contingency plan to save my life. The heavy oak door opened and I stepped into a massive office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Daniel Mercer was standing by his desk, looking nothing like a terrifying corporate titan. He was remarkably calm, and he did not ask me a single question about my data science resume or my lack of recent work experience. Instead, he looked at me with a deep sense of familiarity and walked directly over to a vintage brass safe built into his wall. He carefully turned the dial, opened the heavy metal door, and handed me an aged, yellowed envelope sealed with thick amber wax. He pointed to the date written in familiar handwriting across the front, indicating it had been sealed exactly 15 years ago. My hands were trembling as Daniel revealed the unbelievable truth. He explained that 20 years prior, when he was just a desperate young man with a bold business plan, every single bank in the state had completely rejected him. The only person who believed in his vision was my Grandpa Harrison, who boldly invested $200,000 to help launch Mercer Holdings. But my grandfather did not want the company shares for himself. In exchange for saving Daniel, he demanded an 8% founding stake and placed it directly into a secret, irrevocable trust solely under my name. Daniel looked me in the eyes and gently explained that, due to the massive growth of his tech conglomerate, my hidden founding stake was now valued at a staggering $2.4 million. I broke the brittle wax seal and found 3 items inside. There was the official legal certificate proving my ownership alongside a small worn leather journal and a handwritten letter. I opened the journal and gasped. Page after page, my grandfather had meticulously documented my father, Gerald, and his abusive, misogynistic behavior spanning 3 entire decades. Grandpa Harrison had silently watched my father dismiss me, belittle my mother, and plot his corporate control. Because he knew with absolute certainty that Gerald would eventually try to completely break my independent spirit, my grandfather secretly built me an undeniable ironclad financial escape route. I unfolded his beautiful handwritten letter and wept as I read his final words. He explicitly urged me to use this massive wealth to build my own beautiful life and to never let toxic family members control me with money ever again. The absolute silence in the grand ballroom was suddenly shattered when my father finally snapped. Unable to comprehend his total loss of control, Gerald threw a massive, screaming public tantrum right there on the polished marble floor. His face turned completely purple as he aggressively shouted that I was an ungrateful child and that I truly deserved to scrub hotel toilets for daring to disobey his strict commands. In his blind, furious rage, he entirely destroyed his own pristine corporate reputation in front of 200 elite guests, politicians, and business partners who were now staring at him in absolute disgust. Even Marcus stepped away in embarrassment, realizing their family empire was crumbling. Standing confidently at the microphone, I remained completely calm, refusing to sink to his pathetic level of hatred. After years of being silenced, I finally found my voice. I publicly and eloquently dismantled every single one of his malicious lies to the silent ballroom. I exposed the absolute truth about the fabricated $1,200 textbook theft, his cruel systematic career sabotage, and his horrifying plot to force me into an arranged marriage just to secure a plumbing corporate merger. Setting a permanent, unshakable boundary, I looked directly into his panicked eyes and declared that I was entirely done seeking his toxic approval, and I would never let him control my life or dictate my worth ever again. Gerald and his favored son Marcus were forced to flee the gala in deep, agonizing humiliation. In the following weeks, their massive logistics empire was severely crippled by countless contract cancellations from executives who firmly refused to work with a man who would maliciously destroy his own daughter. Meanwhile, my life transformed beautifully. I happily moved out of my tiny studio into a gorgeous new apartment and began thriving in my prestigious corner office at Mercer Holdings. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I visited Grandpa Harrison at his peaceful grave, bringing his favorite yellow roses. I sat in the soft grass and deeply thanked him for his profound, incredible foresight, knowing that his love had saved me and I was finally completely free. If I have learned anything from this grueling, agonizing journey, it is that the people who truly love you will always protect you by building foundations for your independence, not by trapping you in a cage of financial abuse. Setting strict boundaries with toxic family members is never an act of betrayal or cruelty. It is an act of vital survival and profound self-respect. You do not owe anyone your obedience, especially those who treat love like a chain. Sometimes you have to walk through the absolute darkest moments and scrub the lowest floors to finally discover the beautiful, abundant life you actually deserve. If my journey to freedom resonated with you, and you genuinely connect with what I shared, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who desperately needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue bringing you more powerful stories of survival and karma.